Welcome to the deep dive. Lately the news seems full of warnings from the FBI, from CISA, about these rising cyber threats. And they're targeting the really critical stuff, right? The infrastructure that keeps everything running, oil and gas, power grids, transport. What's kind of striking, though, is that they're saying even unsophisticated hackers are managing to cause problems. So it raises this really big question. If these systems have firewalls and presumably people configuring them, patching, watching them, why are breaches still getting through?
Yeah, it really is the core puzzle, isn't it? We
Yeah.
spend, significant money, significant effort on these defenses, but the reality just doesn't seem to match up. So our goal today in this deep dive is to really get under the hood of why traditional firewalls seem to be struggling, particularly in these OT operational technology environments. We're going to be digging into the ideas from that BlastWave blog post, the one called 8 Reasons Why Firewalls Are Failing. Hopefully we can unpack those limitations and give you, the listener, a clearer view of the challenges and maybe what some solutions look like. Because the bottom line is, despite all the firewall investment, these attacks are still happening.
Okay, right. Let's jump into that first reason then. Outbound, inbound. Now that sounds a little counterintuitive. What exactly does that mean in a security context?
Sure. So the basic idea is that even connections going out of your network, things that seem harmless, maybe someone just browsing a website, can actually create a pass back in. Malicious software, especially what we call command and control or C2 malware, it's designed to use those outgoing connections. It essentially phones home to servers controlled by the attackers using that established path. Think of it like a hidden two-way radio the malware sets up. It gets instructions, sends back stolen data, and it often looks just like normal web traffic.
Huh. So you think you've just opened a door to let something out, but really it's letting things sneak back in. And this ties into how things like ransomware spread once they're inside.
Exactly that. Ransomware often really depends on that C2 communication. It needs it to get encryption keys, for example, or to send stolen data out before locking things down. So if an attacker compromises just one machine, just one foothold in that OT network, and gets that C2 link working, they can then start moving sideways, laterally, we call it, spreading from that first machine to others across the network.
Yeah.
And boom, they can deploy ransomware much more widely.
Wow. Okay. That really shows how one small opening can lead to a huge problem. It's all connected. All right, the second reason you mentioned from the blog, default permit all rules. I mean, that sounds dangerous just hearing it.
It absolutely is. For ease of use, when you first set up a firewall, many of them ship with really broad default rules. Basically, let everything through initially. The idea is to make it easy to get things working quickly. But, and this is the crucial part, if the IT or security teams don't go back and meticulously review and harden those defaults, which means tightening them up, only allowing exactly what's needed for operations, well then they're essentially leaving lots of doors unlocked for attackers. It's a major risk if you just assume the default settings are safe.
Yeah, it's like getting a new house and assuming all the locks are unique and secure without actually checking them. Okay, let's talk about reason 3. Patching takes too long. This feels especially relevant for critical infrastructure where you can't just reboot things easily.
You've nailed a huge challenge there. It's not like your typical office IT where patching is maybe annoying but doable. In industrial control systems and OT environments, updates are much trickier. A reboot, which is often needed for a patch, might mean shutting down a production line or disrupting a critical service. That can have real safety implications or huge operational costs. And the BlastWave blog makes a really sobering point. They estimate something like 35% of known industrial vulnerabilities, these CVEs,
Yeah.
they might never get patched. Could be because the system is too old, end of life. Maybe the company that made it doesn't even exist anymore. So these holes just stay open.
And attackers know this, right? These known unpatched vulnerabilities are like low-hanging fruit for them.
Precisely. They are very aware of the patching difficulties in OT, so they actively scan for these known documented flaws. It's often way easier for them to use an existing exploit than to develop something completely new. These systems become targets.
Okay, moving to number 4, admin interfaces left wide open. This sounds like Security 101. Why is this still such a common problem?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it's surprisingly persistent. We're talking about things like web consoles used to manage devices, or even like physical serial ports that aren't properly locked down. These can be easy ways in for attackers, and the risk just skyrockets if they're protected only by weak passwords, or worse, default passwords that nobody ever changed. Just one forgotten admin interface, especially if it gives high-level control, can be the initial foothold an attacker needs to get in and start looking around.
It just highlights how important that detailed configuration and constant checking really is. Never assume. All right, number 5, complexity is the enemy. How does the complexity of the firewalls themselves become a vulnerability?
Well, think about modern firewalls, especially in these complex OT networks.
Yeah.
They have tons of rules, lots of exceptions, different zones, connections. It gets really intricate. Managing all that correctly requires deep expertise and, honestly, constant vigilance. As the rule sets grow, as things change, the chances of human error just creep up. Maybe someone makes a mistake configuring a rule, or maybe an experienced person leaves the team and knowledge gets lost. Those little gaps, those misconfigurations caused by complexity, they can create security holes that attackers are, well, very good at finding. Even the best tool is only as good as its management.
Right, so it's not just buying the tech, it's having the skilled people and the solid processes to keep it running securely, day in, day out. Okay, next up is weak segmentation. This seems like a big one for OT, where, as you said, speed and low latency are often king.
That's a really key point. Traditionally, a lot of OT networks were designed to be quite flat, meaning not many internal divisions or segments. This was often done deliberately to make sure communication between machines was super fast and efficient, minimizing delays for controlling physical processes. But the security downside is huge. If an attacker gets onto one machine in a flat network, there aren't many internal walls to stop them from moving laterally, jumping from system to system quite easily. Now, segmentation is a security best practice, but trying to implement it later in sensitive OT environments can be tough. It can add latency, which might disrupt those real-time processes. It's a tricky balance.
Definitely sounds like a trade-off between operational needs and security posture. A tough one.
Okay, number 7, trusting old tech. This has to be a massive issue in critical infrastructure, given how long some of this equipment stays in service. Oh, absolutely. Huge issue. You've got critical systems, power plants, water treatment, manufacturing relying on technology that might be decades old. These legacy systems, they just weren't built with modern cybersecurity threats in mind. They often lack basic security features we take for granted today. Trying to bolt on modern security can be difficult, sometimes impossible. Yet these vulnerable systems are still running the show, running essential services. It creates this inherent, often unavoidable risk. It's like, trying to put a complex, modern alarm system on an ancient castle gate.
Really puts the challenge into perspective, securing things that were never meant to be connected in the first place. Okay, the final reason from the blog, number 8. Thinking the perimeter still matters. This feels like a fundamental shift in security thinking.
It absolutely is. That traditional idea, build a strong wall around your network, the perimeter, and everything inside is safe. That's really breaking down, especially in OT. These environments are getting way more connected. You've got third-party contractors needing remote access, cloud services being used for data analysis, remote workers connecting in. Each of these connections, often necessary for business, requires opening up exceptions in the firewall. We call it punching holes in the perimeter. So in this much more distributed, interconnected world, just relying on that outer wall, it's just not enough anymore. The perimeter is porous.
Okay, so we've gone through these 8 reasons, and it paints a pretty challenging picture for traditional firewalls in these critical OT spaces. Given all these limitations, especially with threats getting, more sophisticated, what's the alternative? What kind of approach is needed?
Well, the BlastWave blog we've been drawing from points towards something like an OT zero-trust firewall. The whole idea behind zero trust is basically flipping the old model. Instead of trust but verify once someone's inside, it's never trust, always verify. Every connection, every access attempt needs validation. Solutions like BlastShield, which they mentioned, try to implement this with things like passwordless authentication that helps massively against phishing. They also talk about making networks effectively invisible so attackers can't even see the critical assets. Plus enhanced segmentation, breaking things down into much smaller, isolated zones to limit blast radius if something does get compromised. And importantly, these newer approaches are often designed specifically to help protect those difficult legacy systems too.
Right, it sounds much more granular, much more adaptive, a layered defense rather than just a single wall. And it seems especially vital for these industries where, like the blog says, you really can't afford to get this wrong, the stakes are just too high.
Exactly. We're not just talking about data breaches or financial loss here, although those happen. In OT, a security failure can lead to equipment damage, service disruptions, environmental incidents, and potentially risks to human safety. It's about protecting the physical world.
This has been incredibly insightful, really digging into why the old ways might not be enough anymore for OT security. For you listening, if you want to explore this further and understand how to maybe bolster your own OT network security, visit www.blastwave.com. Use cases, you can download the use case ebook there. It dives deeper into these challenges and talks more about how approaches like zero trust can build a stronger defense.
Absolutely. And maybe as a final thought to leave you with, as we see this traditional perimeter dissolving and attacks becoming, frankly, more advanced and faster, it really forces us to ask, doesn't it, what fundamental shifts, what core changes in our security strategies are really necessary to properly safeguard these critical operations moving forward? It's a big question, and one that everyone involved in critical infrastructure and cybersecurity needs to be thinking about very seriously.